A reclusive billionaire and a humble housemaid, two worlds destined to collide. When Adrian discovers Elena's hidden talent, a connection sparks that defies their differences. But secrets from the past and the weight of judgment threaten their love. Can they overcome it all for a chance at true happiness? The sprawling Blackwell estate, nestled on the outskirts of the city, was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed lush, manicured gardens, and a driveway lined with cherry blossoms led to the grandeur of Adrian Blackwell's secluded mansion. Inside, the air was thick with silence, punctuated only by the faint hum of machinery. It was a palace of glass and steel, yet devoid of warmth, a reflection of its owner's life. Adrian Blackwell was a name that reverberated through the corridors of power and wealth. A self-made billionaire, he had built an empire on grit and vision, transforming Blackwell Enterprises into a global phenomenon. Yet, for all his accomplishments, Adrian was a man haunted by solitude. Behind his chiseled jawline, piercing grey eyes, and immaculately tailored suits lay a deep void he could neither name nor fill. His days were consumed by boardroom battles. His nights? Spent in empty rooms where echoes were his only companions. But Adrian's life was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated. Elena Ramirez stepped cautiously into the mansion's grand foyer that morning, her heart racing as her eyes adjusted to the opulence before her. This wasn't her first day at the Blackwell estate, but the sheer scale of it always left her momentarily breathless. The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, and the polished marble floors reflected her slight frame like a mirror. Elena was a woman of quiet strength. At 27, she had shouldered more responsibility than most her age. Her delicate features were framed by waves of dark brown hair, often tied back while working. Her almond-shaped eyes carried the weight of unspoken struggles, yet they sparkled with resilience. A gifted singer in her youth, Elena had once dreamt of performing on grand stages. But life had other plans. After her father's sudden passing, with younger siblings to care for, she took up various jobs to make ends meet. Working as a housemaid at the Blackwell mansion was just another step in her journey to ensure her family's survival. As she moved through the house, tidying rooms and arranging fresh flowers, she couldn't help but wonder about the man behind the name. Adrian Blackwell was a mystery to her. She'd seen glimpses of him, a tall, commanding figure with a presence that filled every room, but their interactions were limited to polite nods and brief instructions. Still, there was something about him that piqued her curiosity. An air of melancholy that didn't align with his wealth and success. Adrian, meanwhile, watched her from a distance. Standing by his study window, he observed Elena meticulously arranging a bouquet in the living room. There was a grace to her movements, an authenticity that stirred something within him. He found himself wondering about her life beyond these walls. What dreams had she tucked away? What stories did those expressive eyes hold? Unbeknownst to Adrian, Elena felt his gaze. Her heart skipped a beat, though she dared not look up. There was a magnetic pull between them, unspoken yet palpable, like a melody waiting to be composed. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the mansion's lights cast a golden glow, Adrian found himself wandering into the kitchen, a place he rarely visited. Elena was there humming softly as she wiped down the counters. The sound of her voice caught him off guard. It was soothing, rich with emotion, and it struck a chord he hadn't felt in years. "You have a beautiful voice," Adrian said, his deep baritone breaking the silence. Startled, Elena turned to face him, her cheeks flushing. "Mr. Blackwell, I didn't realize you were there. It's just a habit." "Don't stop," he said, taking a step closer. His usual stoic demeanor softened, and for the first time she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "You should never hide something so beautiful." Elena looked down, her hands fidgeting with the cloth she held. "Thank you, sir, but it's nothing special." "That's where you're wrong," Adrian replied, his voice almost a whisper. For a fleeting moment their eyes met, and the world around them seemed to fade away. In that shared silence, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a connection neither could explain. As Adrian walked away, a rare smile tugged at his lips, and as Elena resumed her tasks, her heart raced, the echo of his words lingering in her mind. That night, two souls, worlds apart, lay awake, each wondering if their encounter was the beginning of something neither dared to dream. Days at the Blackwell estate passed in a quiet rhythm, but beneath the surface, subtle changes were unfolding. Adrian found himself paying closer attention to Elena, not just as a diligent housemaid, but as a person. Her warmth was evident in every gesture, whether it was the way she greeted the staff with genuine smiles or how she arranged fresh flowers in the library, always mindful of which colours might brighten the room. Adrian, though reserved, began to notice the little things, the hum of her soft melodies as she worked, the way her laughter filled the air when she spoke to the gardener, the quiet determination in her eyes when she tackled her tasks. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more, yet even he couldn't deny the way her presence seemed to stir something within him. One late afternoon, as the sky turned shades of amber and rose, Adrian retreated to his private garden, a hidden oasis within the estate. The garden was his sanctuary, a place where he often sought solace from the pressures of his world. But as he approached, a sound stopped him in his tracks. It was Elena's voice. Rich and soulful, it carried on the gentle breeze. She was singing, unaware of any audience. The song was a hauntingly beautiful melody, filled with longing and hope, as though it carried pieces of her heart in every note. Adrian stood still, mesmerized, unable to look away. She was seated on a stone bench near the fountain, her eyes closed as she sang with unguarded emotion. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something pierce the armor he'd built around himself. Her voice wasn't just beautiful, it was alive, raw, genuine. It reached into the deepest corners of his being, places he had long thought numb. He wanted to step forward to say something, but he hesitated. In that moment, he feared breaking the spell. Elena finished her song with a soft sigh, opening her eyes to the fading sunlight. She glanced around, suddenly aware of her surroundings, and froze when her gaze fell upon Adrian. He was standing at the edge of the path, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Blackwell," she stammered, standing abruptly. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson, and she clutched her hands nervously. I didn't know anyone was here. Adrian stepped closer, his movements deliberate but gentle, as though he didn't want to frighten her. "Please, don't apologize," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "That was extraordinary." Eleanor's eyes widened, her embarrassment only deepening. "It's nothing, really, just something I do to pass the time." "If that's nothing," Adrian said with a faint smile, "I can't imagine what something must sound like." She glanced down, unable to hold his gaze. "Thank you, sir, but it's just a hobby. Nothing important." "Don't diminish it," he replied, his tone firm yet kind. "You have a gift, Elena. I hope you know that." Elena's heart fluttered at his words, but she quickly masked her feelings with a polite nod. "You're very kind, Mr. Blackwell. I should get back to work." As she hurried past him, Adrian watched her go, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. He'd always valued control, the ability to keep his personal and professional lives strictly separate. But Eleanor's voice had reached a part of him he'd forgotten existed. It wasn't just her talent that intrigued him. It was her authenticity, her unguarded passion. That evening, as Adrian sat alone in his study, her song played on a loop in his mind. For the first time in years, he felt inspired, not by ambition or success, but by the quiet, undeniable spark ignited by a woman who had no idea of her own brilliance. Adrian's thoughts lingered on Elena's voice for days, the haunting melody a constant presence in his mind. He found himself craving her presence, not just for the music, but for the warmth and authenticity she brought into his otherwise cold, orderly world. Still, he wasn't entirely sure how to approach her without making her uncomfortable. For all his wealth and power, Adrian Blackwell was unfamiliar with the subtle art of connection. Over breakfast one morning, an idea struck him. As Elena walked past, balancing a tray of fresh fruit and coffee, he looked up from his newspaper and said casually, "Elena, do you enjoy music?" Startled by the sudden question, she paused mid-step. "Music, sir." "Yes, I suppose so. It's always been a part of my life." "Do you play any instruments?" he asked, his tone as neutral as he could manage, though he felt a flicker of hope. She hesitated, setting the tray down gently. "Not anymore. I used to, but it's been years." "A shame," Adrian said, leaning back in his chair. "Music has a way of speaking when words fail. You seem to have a connection to it. I could tell from the way you were singing the other day." Her cheeks flushed and she glanced away. "It's just something I do for myself. I don't think I'm very good." Adrian frowned slightly, setting down his coffee cup. "You're wrong. You have a gift, Elena. You shouldn't hide it." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded and excused herself. Yet his words stayed with her, an echo she couldn't shake. Over the next few days, Adrian found subtle ways to encourage her. He began playing classical music softly in the background during dinner, or while working in his study, occasionally mentioning his admiration for certain composers. When Elena entered the room, he'd casually ask her opinion on a piece or a melody, drawing her into conversation without pressuring her to share more. Elena, though cautious, started to feel a strange sense of comfort around him. His usual stern demeanour seemed to soften in her presence, and his interest felt genuine rather than intrusive. Still, her insecurities loomed large. Could someone like Adrian Blackwell truly appreciate anything she had to offer? One afternoon, as she dusted the grand piano in the music room, Adrian entered unexpectedly. She froze, her hand lingering on the polished surface of the keys. "Do you play?" he asked, his voice gentle. Elena shook her head. "Not anymore. It's been so long, I doubt I even remember how." "You don't forget something like that," he said, stepping closer. "It's like riding a bicycle. The skill stays with you, even if it's hidden for a while." She hesitated, then finally let out a nervous laugh. "I wouldn't even know where to begin." Adrian sat down on the bench and gestured to the spot beside him. "Begin with one note, just one." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Oh no, Mr. Blackwell, I couldn't—" "Adrian," he corrected, smiling faintly. "And yes, you can. Please indulge me." Reluctantly, she sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly as they hovered over the keys. She pressed a single note, the sound resonating in the quiet room. Adrian didn't speak, simply nodding in encouragement. Slowly, she added another note, then another, piecing together a simple melody from memory. Her movements were hesitant at first, but grew steadier with each passing moment. Adrian watched her, captivated, not just by the music, but by the transformation taking place before him. For the first time, he saw the spark of confidence flicker in her eyes, and it stirred something profound within him. When she finally stopped, Elena let out a shaky breath, her cheeks flushed with both exhilaration and embarrassment. I didn't think I could still do it." "You can do far more than you realize," Adrian said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Their eyes met, and for a moment the barriers between them seemed to fade. Elena felt a warmth in his gaze that she hadn't expected, and Adrian realized just how deeply her presence had begun to affect him. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light through the music room's tall windows, the two of them sat in a shared silence that spoke louder than any words. The fragile connection they had begun to build felt both exhilarating and terrifying, as though they were standing at the edge of something neither fully understood but couldn't ignore. Part 4. Unveiling Dreams. The grand ballroom of the Blackwell estate buzzed with anticipation. Adrian's annual charity gala was a highlight of the city's social calendar, drawing the elite for an evening of opulence and goodwill. This year, however, Adrian had planned something different, a surprise that not even the closest members of his inner circle could have predicted. Elena stood at the edge of the preparations, her hands tightly gripping the edge of her apron. She'd never seen anything like this. Chandeliers sparkled like constellations overhead, and the room was alive with murmured conversations about auction items and charitable causes. She was meant to remain invisible amidst the glamour, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Yet tonight, her role would be far from ordinary. "Elena," Adrian's deep voice called out from across the room, making her heart leap. He approached, his presence as commanding as ever, though his expression was softer than usual. "May I have a word?" "Of course, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Adrian led her to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the bustling staff and prying eyes. He turned to her, his gaze steady and reassuring. "I've been thinking about tonight's entertainment," he began. "We usually hire a professional act, but this year I wanted something more meaningful." Elena tilted her head, unsure of where this was going. "I'm sure whatever you choose will be perfect, Mr. Blackwell." "Adrian," he corrected, a faint smile playing on his lips. "And I've already made my choice. I want you to sing tonight." Her eyes widened in shock. "Me? Sing? Adrian, I couldn't possibly—" "You can," he interrupted gently, his voice firm yet encouraging. "Think of it as a favor. The guests will love it, and I—" He hesitated, then added, "I believe in your talent. You shouldn't keep it hidden." Eleanor's mind raced. The thought of performing in front of such an audience was terrifying. She thought of her family, her modest life, and the fear of being judged by strangers from a world so far removed from her own. But then she looked into Adrian's eyes and saw not just confidence, but something deeper, a belief in her that she hadn't felt in herself for years. "I'll try," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian's smile widened, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of pride. "That's all I ask." As the evening progressed, Elena's nerves grew more intense. She stood backstage, the sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter echoing through the room. She smoothed her simple dress, borrowed from one of the other staff members, and tried to steady her breathing. Adrian appeared beside her, his presence grounding her in a way she couldn't explain. "You'll be amazing," he said softly. "Just be yourself." She nodded, her heart pounding as she stepped onto the small stage. The room fell silent as the spotlight illuminated her. She gripped the microphone, her hands trembling, and took a deep breath. Then she began to sing. The first few notes were hesitant, but as the melody filled the room, she found her footing. Her voice soared, rich, emotive, weaving a story of love, loss, and hope. The audience was spellbound, their conversations forgotten as they watched her pour her soul into the performance. Adrian stood at the edge of the crowd, his chest tightening with every note. He had always admired her talent, but seeing her like this, vulnerable yet powerful, nervous yet captivating, left him utterly mesmerized. He realized then that his admiration had grown into something far more profound. When the final note faded into silence, the room erupted in applause. Eleanor's cheeks flushed as she looked out at the sea of clapping hands and smiling faces. Tears pricked her eyes, and for the first time, she felt truly seen. Adrian approached her as she stepped off the stage, his expression warm and sincere. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Thank you for trusting me." "Thank you for believing in me," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. As the night wore on, guests approached Eleanor to praise her performance. but her focus kept drifting back to Adrian. She couldn't ignore the way his gaze lingered on her, or the way her heart raced every time he was near. For Adrian, the evening was a revelation. Elena's courage and authenticity had not only captivated the guests, but had also deepened the connection he felt with her. He knew now that she was far more than a hidden talent. She was someone who had touched his life in ways he hadn't thought possible. As the gala came to a close, Adrian and Elena found themselves alone in the quiet of the garden, the soft glow of lanterns casting gentle shadows around them. Neither spoke, but in the silence a new chapter in their story began to unfold. Adrian couldn't stop thinking about the gala. Elena's performance had been nothing short of magical, and the admiration he felt for her had grown into something far deeper. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel vulnerable, to imagine what life might be like if he let someone in. Yet, a weight lingered in his thoughts, a sense that their worlds were too different, their connection too fragile to survive the harsh realities of his life. Determined to address his feelings, Adrian decided to speak with Elena. He found her in the library, carefully sorting books onto the tall mahogany shelves. She looked peaceful, lost in her task. But when she noticed him, her expression softened. "Adrian," she said, her voice warm, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I wanted to talk," he said, stepping closer, "about the other night, and about us." Her heart skipped a beat, and she set the book down carefully. "What about us?" Adrian hesitated, searching for the right words. "I haven't felt this way in a long time," he admitted, his voice low and sincere. "You've brought something into my life that I didn't know I was missing. I don't want to ignore it anymore." Elena's cheeks flushed, and she looked down, her hands twisting nervously. "Adrian, I don't know what to say." "Say you feel it too," he said, stepping closer. "Say we can figure this out, no matter how complicated it might be." For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine it, a life where she could be with him without fear or doubt. But then, reality crashed in, and her expression darkened. "There's something you don't know," she said quietly. "Something that might change the way you see me." Adrian's brow furrowed, but he reached out, gently taking her hand. "Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Nothing will change how I feel." Tears welled in her eyes as she pulled her hand away. "You don't understand. I didn't come to work here by chance. I was desperate. My family needed help, and I thought this job would be a lifeline. But there's more to it than that." Adrian's heart sank as her words hung in the air. "Elena, what are you trying to say?" Taking a deep breath, she began to explain. Years ago, her father had been involved in a legal battle with Blackwell Enterprises, a fight that had left her family bankrupt and her father broken. When Adrian's company had expanded, it had inadvertently displaced hundreds of workers, including her father. Though Adrian himself had likely never known the details, the impact had been devastating. "When I saw the posting for a position here, I thought, maybe I could understand the man behind it all," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to hate you, Adrian. I wanted to see the person responsible for everything we lost. But I didn't expect—" She trailed off, her tears falling freely now. "I didn't expect to find someone so kind, so generous. Someone who made me feel seen for the first time in years." Adrian was stunned. The revelation hit him like a tidal wave, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. "Elena, I had no idea. If I'd known—" "I know you didn't," she interrupted, wiping her tears. "But that doesn't change the fact that my family suffered because of decisions your company made. And now, I don't know if I can separate that from what I feel for you." Adrian's heart ached at her words. He wanted to fix it, to erase the pain his success had caused, but he knew it wasn't that simple. "Elena, I can't change the past, but I can promise you this. I will do everything in my power to make things right for your family. And for us, if you'll let me." Elena looked at him, her emotions a whirlwind of fear, hope, and longing. She wanted to believe him, to trust that they could find a way forward, but the weight of their shared history loomed large. "I need time," she said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. "Time to figure out if I can let go of the past and embrace what's in front of me." Adrian nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting." As she walked away, the distance between them felt both unbearable and necessary. For Adrian, it was a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront not just his feelings for Elena, but the legacy of his success. And for Elena, it was a chance to rediscover her own strength and decide if love could truly conquer the scars of the past. The days following Elena's revelation were marked by a quiet tension. Adrian and Elena avoided direct conversations, though their shared glances spoke volumes. Each wrestled with their own fears. Adrian with the guilt of his company's past actions, and Elena with the burden of reconciling her family's pain with her growing feelings for him. It wasn't long before their unspoken struggle became impossible to ignore. One evening, Adrian called Elena to the study. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls. Elena entered hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. Adrian stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the darkening sky. He turned when she entered, his expression resolute. "Elena, we need to talk," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I can't let this silence between us continue." She nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I've been thinking about it too," she admitted, "but I don't know how to move past everything." Adrian stepped closer, his gaze fixed on hers. "Then let me show you that we can. I've been working on something that I hope will make a difference for your family and everyone else who's been affected by Blackwell Enterprises." He handed her a folder. Inside were documents detailing a fund he had set up, dedicated to supporting displaced workers and their families, providing financial assistance, career retraining, and housing support. Eleanor's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. "Adrian, this is incredible, but why? You don't owe me or my family anything." "I do," he said firmly. "I can't change the past, but I can take responsibility for it. And I want you to know that your courage in telling me the truth made this possible. You made me see the human side of my decisions." Her heart swelled with emotion, but doubt still lingered. "Adrian, this will help so many people, but what about us? How can we ever make this work when we come from such different worlds?" Adrian took her hands in his touch gentle but unwavering. "Elena, I don't care about the world's expectations. I care about you. If that means risking my reputation, my wealth, everything I've built, then so be it. You've shown me what truly matters." Tears filled her eyes and she searched his face for any sign of doubt but found none. "You're willing to risk everything for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I already have," he said with a faint smile, "and I'll do it again if it means we can be together." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. News of Adrian's fund spread quickly. While many praised his efforts, others in the business world criticized him for what they saw as a sentimental move. Adrian didn't care. For the first time in his life, he felt free, unburdened by the expectations of others. Elena, too, faced her own challenges. Her family, initially wary of her relationship with Adrian, slowly came to see his sincerity through his actions. She began to rebuild her confidence, not just as someone loved by a billionaire, but as a woman reclaiming her dreams. Adrian's unwavering support inspired her to pursue music again. She started performing at local events, her voice reaching new audiences and earning admiration for its raw beauty. One evening, Adrian surprised Elena with an impromptu trip to a quaint lakeside villa. The setting was serene, with a soft breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. As they stood on the dock, the water shimmering under the moonlight, Adrian pulled a small box from his pocket. "Elena," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "You've shown me the true meaning of love and trust. You've taught me to see beyond wealth and power, to appreciate the beauty of life's simple joys. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worthy of your love." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Eleanor's breath caught, her heart overflowing with emotion. She thought of all they had been through, the pain, the challenges, the healing. And in that moment, she knew her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, Adrian, I will." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he never wanted to let go. In the quiet of the night, under a sky filled with stars, they began their new journey together, ready to face whatever lay ahead, with love as their foundation.